Hi, welcome to Building Brand Gravity. This is Anne Green. I'm CEO of G&S Business Communications, and I'm very excited to be joined today by my partner, Kate Threewitts, who is our Chief People Officer, and also Marjani Williams, who is our VP of DE&I and Client Service. Hi, ladies. Welcome to Building Brand Gravity.
Hello.
Hi.
Glad to be
Excellent.
here.
So we got
Yes.
a big topic today. There is much debate, and some of which I view as very calculated and somewhat cynical, happening in our culture today regarding what's commonly known as DE&I. But as with so many things in our society, and in marketing communications more specifically, I think we make a big mistake if we get caught at the surface level. So there's a lot of concepts that are encompassed under the moniker of DE&I, and they amount to more than an acronym. And they carry a lot of implications for organizations, ours and our clients, in every industry, every sector. In my opinion, they also carry a lot of impact for society as a whole. So there's a lot at stake at here. And as communications counselors, I really feel that we need to push ourselves to be more thoughtful and precise about some of these concepts. So the focus of this podcast, as the folks who listen know, is the idea of brand gravity, which is what attracts individuals to, or in some cases, repels them from an idea, a brand, a product, an organization, or even another person. So today, I'm very excited for us to zoom in on the I of DE&I, which is inclusion. We want to peel back some of the layers here to explore what the word means both internally at an organization, but also how that organization engages with and is perceived externally, which is a big part of the work we do for our clients. And I would say that the working hypothesis for this conversation, which we will explore, is for ourselves as an organization, but also our clients, is the concept of how inclusion has upsides for deepening connections with all stakeholders, as well as deepening business impact. So I think, Kate and Marjani, you are the perfect folks to join me for this conversation because we've been deeply engaged in this work for some time. And to get started, let's talk about inclusion as one of these component parts of the acronym. What does inclusion actually really mean? Because it's such a buzzword right now. I don't know, Kate, if you want to be the first to kind of jump in, and maybe Marjani, you can build on that.
Sure. There are a lot of definitions out there about what inclusion means. And if we look at how other agencies like McKinsey are defining inclusion, they refer to it as how the workforce experiences the workplace, and then the degree to which employees are able to make meaningful contributions. And that definition certainly resonates with me. I would say for me personally, as head of G&S, people here at G&S, I see it as inclusion being creating that true sense of belonging while instilling that sense of safety. We are human beings and we all have that basic need to feel safe. And safety can mean a lot of different things, right? It can mean big things, such as imminent, clear danger, but it can also mean, do I feel safe with my manager? Do I feel safe putting my voice in the room? Do I feel safe taking confident risk and bringing great ideas, pushing back on our clients to create better ideas and better outcomes? So, I think the superpower for an organization lies in bringing those two components together, the sense of safety and that true feeling of belonging, where GNSers are able to come each and every day, perform the best work of their lives, and really create those moments of inclusion where growth can occur and we can unleash potential.
I think there's a lot of important stuff you've said in there, Kate, especially, maybe we'll come back to this later, the implications when people don't feel safe to put their voice in the room, the kinds of issues that can come up, loss of ideas, lack of fresh thinking, and also lack of calling out ethical breaches or issues or identifying problems before they start. But Marjani, what are you thinking about as you hear Kate reflect on the meaning of the word?
I mean, I have to say, I love that we're starting here. there's, of course, so much conversation and news happening about inclusive policies, but more broadly, DE&I. And I think before we can even begin to unpack it, we have to actually figure out what the thing is, right? I mean, I stepped into this role as a VP of DE&I about a year ago, and I knew we had to be very crystal clear about exactly what we meant when we said diversity, inclusion, equity, because there's still a lot of confusion, I think, among folks who are unclear about the difference between equity and equality, or like what real inclusion looks like, and not just, some of the performative things that we're seeing move around, especially after 2020. But it's important for us to really be clear about the definition so we can actually change the dialogue, right? So the work that we're doing here at G&S is really about everybody here within our workforce. It's not necessarily, trying to pick out one person or the other, or one particular group or the other. We're trying to build policies and a culture that is going to benefit everybody. That's the ultimate goal. And I think that's what real inclusion looks like, very plain and simple. It's allowing space for that safety that Kate mentioned, but allowing people to really bring, I know it sounds a little trite, but bring their whole selves to work as much as they feel comfortable. But we are creating that space and giving folks the option to pull up as they are.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to reflect on, that phrase, bring your whole self to work, because there's such an amazing aspirational element to it. But we also recognize people may not want to, they don't have to bring everything, but to allow the choice that they feel they can is a very, very interesting way of digging into it. But to dig in a bit more, because I love everything you're both starting to lay out on the table here for this conversation. How does, or how should inclusion actually show up in an organization? Where are the places where you could feel it's absent versus where are the places? Because I think the three of us have talked about this a lot, and we've talked about it with our executive team, our task force on DE&I. It's the specificity, like you said, Marjani, that really helps people grab onto this. Some of these concepts are really big and lofty, but you kind of have to bring it to the ground level of what does this feel like, see, look like. So where is inclusion showing up or not showing up in an organization? Give me some examples.
Yeah, I mean, when I started in this role over 25 years ago, in my HR role, inclusion was just beginning to be part of the conversation in organizations, and it wasn't a clear business critical priority for most organizations at that time. And to be honest, it felt like a real check the box moment. And that may have shown up in annual trainings for unconscious bias, but no real plan to apply that within the organization. Today, we see inclusion showing up much different, and it's woven into the very tapestry of who we are as an organization. And, that shows up in the way that we value individual contributions and we value individual strengths. It shows up in the way that we're amplifying voices at every level, and creating those moments of great storytelling where GNSers feel empowered to share not only those things that we have in common, but to share experiences that make them unique. And, Marjani mentioned equity over equality. And I think it's important, on this journey that we're on, that we do, understand equality, but that we have a focus on equity where we're meeting individuals where they are. I think that's a huge shift for organizations, and critical to creating an inclusive environment. And then finally, I would say the way that we build trust with each other and the increase in transparent and clear communications. I mean, that's really been foundational to our success and being able to create a more inclusive environment.
Yeah, it feels like trust is the foundation of everything. I mean, that's something that
Yes.
has been a mantra for me. from a business perspective, whether you're client side, corporate side, whatever organization, nonprofit, for profit, large, small, a lack of trust creates friction. It creates mistrust. It creates closed doors and spinning and confusion and gaslighting and just saying what's happening here. It kind of squelches ideas. It stops people from just feeling excited and collaborative with each other. It makes them feel they have to be territorial or protective, or I just feel like it wastes a lot of time and energy and humanness in the organization. So I think this idea of trust and it's a big discussion in this world. It's a low trust environment right now. And it's going to be, especially with advances in AI and media and disinformation and misinformation, it's going to be interesting. But that kind of question of how these things are interconnected is not just this thing happens over here. It's like trust is woven through everything. One of the you talked about starting your career about 25 years ago. I'm just a little ahead of you, Kate, 30 years. And I, in the corporate world, on the agency side, and, Marjani, I'd like to tee this one up for you. I've heard these concepts talked about, like the term diversity, for many, many, many years. For so long, to me, and I don't think I'm the only one, it boiled down to numbers. What are the numbers of diverse humans, whatever you wanted to define, in an organization, right? And so that seems to me to still be at the crux of some of the battles, like who is where and who's allowed where and what are the numbers. And I think you're right. And the performative stuff, especially after 2020, is a bit like that. Now, I think representation matters tremendously. And I would never discount that, the piece of diversity that's representation. But Marjani, what do you think about that in terms of how DE&I, especially inclusion or these larger terms, are either understood or misunderstood today? Because I think we're still, we're more advanced, but not entirely.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Anne. I mean, the truth is that, as you mentioned, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, they're all very interconnected. We have to take a holistic approach when we're talking about these concepts because we're looking at a whole human being and not just one part of them. So it's not just what you look like or what you believe or your gender identity. It is all of you. And so, I mean, we see a lot of organizations, maybe consciously or unconsciously, falling into box checking so that they can try to either, capture as much of that as they can. But in all honesty, I think DE&I is being reduced and misunderstood in a way that's making it easier for people to lean into just the numbers. Things are moving fast. Markets have been very unstable, and folks are really looking for, quite frankly, a low-cost way to do DE&I. And that time investment, the financial investment, the just the entire investment of an organization in DE&I or DEIB, however they want to call it, it's going to require an all hands on deck approach. And so I really appreciate what we do here at G&S. And, this journey had already started at G&S before I got here with our Think Differently Together teams and just our value of win together. But really looking at, a way that we can make it real for employees and make it feel like something that is a part of the entire G&S experience. And so when you look at the interconnectedness of just all of these principles and the way that we are just defining our approach, I think a great point that we're making this year is a focus on intersectionality. When we look at the many different identities that make up one person, all of us, that makes us unique, it's really getting at how we take a holistic approach to, I won't say treating, but to experiencing a whole person and having the room and the space in the room for that whole person to show up. So, I think I could go on and on about that, but I love the idea of us going together. They say, if you want to go far, go together. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, one thing that you both have been saying that I think I've been considering relative to us both as an organization as well as a counselor to our clients across many, many industries, healthcare, manufacturing, agriculture, financial services, real estate, et cetera, is that these concepts are additive. They're not blocking. I think a lot of it is kind of tipped right now, especially given the cultural context and the kind of battles going on, into sort of a negative, as in, what are you taking away from me? What are you stealing from me? Or what is being prevented? Versus, I think, flipping the script, and this is counsel I would strongly provide to our clients too. How do we flip the script and look at this as an additive way, as in that more holistic view? And, and that actually leads me to the question of, what is the bottom line business benefit, right? Because we're in the world of business and counseling other businesses, and for me, that's a very holistic thing that goes beyond just dollars and cents, but to the whole human community that needs to be created within organizations. But what is the benefit? And one thing that was interesting is that, there's been some skirmishes online lately between various billionaires talking about these topics, and bless those billionaires out there talking about them. But Mark Cuban, one of them, noted entrepreneur, in responding to, one of the strong voices in this area, Elon Musk, who's a complex figure I have a lot of respect for in some ways, and, find him, troubling in others. But, again, I can hold multiple things in my head. I think Mark was talking about, from his perspective, his thoughts on DE&I. And I'll just read some of his tweet, his X on this. Good businesses look where others don't. Find employees that'll put your business in the best possible position to succeed. People of various races, ethnicities, orientation that are regularly excluded or have been from hiring, he feels by hiring them, we can find more qualified people. And he said, we live in a country with diverse demographics and an area where trust in businesses is hard to come by. People tend to connect more easily with people who are like them, and having a workforce that's diverse and representative of your stakeholders is good for business. So I would say that we're likely in his camp, but clearly he sees a competitive advantage to attracting and retaining diverse and talent and ensuring they feel empowered. So either of you jump in. What's your take on Mark's stance? Which pieces of that POV resonate with you relative to what we're trying to do here?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it is wholeheartedly that it's a business advantage for us. And I do think that those that are backing off DE&I and their efforts in this moment are going to be left behind. So I agree with him there. I don't think, in my opinion, that this is the time for us to take our foot off the gas. We started this journey and committed to this journey because we felt at our core that it was the right thing to do for our people, for our clients, and for the agency as a whole. And the fact is the marketplace and the labor market will not become less complex. If anything, it's going to become more complex and more competitive. And if we are going to serve a diverse marketplace, then we have got to continue our journey and continue our commitment. It's critical to our long-term success and growth as an agency. And so, I really feel that it is a mistake, to back off of this commitment. And so I'm proud at G&S that we are continuing down, down the road, down the journey, and, holding tight to what we believe, and embracing diversity is our core value. And I think we're staying true to that.
You made a really great point, Kate, about just our journey and like what it's going to look like. Maybe, this year, even, we don't know with the way that the labor market is moving. But even beyond that, I think it's really important to note the human impact. We have Generation Z and like even millennials, I fall within that category. But there is a lot of there's a lot of fight in Gen Z, and they're not afraid to challenge, organizations and companies based on their beliefs, and they will make very, very concrete decisions and based on their belief system. So they may not come and work for you if they don't agree with, the morality of your company, or if they deem you to be unethical, or if they don't feel safe there. Folks have options, and I have a lot of respect for just that kind of of mindset. But I do think, bringing it back to the business case, we're seeing very clear evidence. You mentioned McKinsey earlier, Kate, but they released their Diversity Matters Even More report. And there were some findings there that really spoke to what we're talking about with the business case. I mean, about 30% of companies, or companies that were within the 30th percentile, who were really focused on DE&I, they're performing way better than the folks who are not. And so we're seeing that it has an impact on the bottom line, but it's also going to have a very clear impact on, the workforce and how folks are able to recruit the top talent. Because we're not just talking about, this vast talent pool. Like, we're watching as the talent pool changes. And so if they want top talent, they're going to have to show up on behalf of their workforce.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the generations. I reflect a lot on the fact that we have 4 generations in the workforce right now actively, and we have a 5th coming up real soon. I forget what the cutoff's going to be between Gen Z and the next generation. But boomers, I'm an Xer, millennials, Gen Z. And to me, the bottom line business piece in terms of creating a healthy, thoughtful organizational community that can really perform at an elite level in whatever work you're doing, whether you're, again, the client side, one of our clients, or whether you're an agency serving those entities. One of the things that, to me, that's interesting about inclusion is where it dovetails with the idea of just being better managers and better in a corporate and human community, more elite. We are communicators, right? We're integrated marketing communications, which means we are required and expected to be elite communicators. But oftentimes there's so much of working between people, across all kinds of difference. It could be generational, it could be racial, it could be background, it could be anything, just life experience, that gets in the way, that creates friction, that creates misunderstanding, that prevents people from doing their best work, prevents voices, as we said, from being put in the room, prevents people from bringing fresh thinking, which is, again, if my mandate as CEO of the agency is to assure that we are a super high functioning team for our clients, elite communicators, and also super high functioning internally. We often joke about Dr. Heal Thyself or Shoemaker's Children. I don't want to be a situation where we're providing counsel to our clients and yet internally, our internal communications is having breakdowns. But the other thing I reflect on too, in terms of this inclusion, where does inclusion lie in this, is, Harvard Business Review makes a lot of money every year. I'm a subscriber, and 90% of that whole situation, including the university itself and the business school, is good management. Right. So one of my big things, and I know you're both on it, is how do we connect the dots to say it's all a tapestry, and DE&I or inclusion's not something that's happening over here, that it's really about knitting it together with all the manager training we're doing and the employee engagement surveys and client satisfaction surveys and the quality of work we do and our ability to win and retain business. This stuff is all connected because it's about that level of communications. And that really brings me to get more specific about a concept we're trying to advance this year, which is this inclusive leadership campaign or tools or program initiative to land that concept embedded in how we manage people and how. So I'd love for one of you to talk about what we're doing in 2024 specifically to try to make this really real for folks and give them actual tools to use.
Yeah, I can jump in here. Just at the end of last year, our DE&I task force, and shout out to Kate and the policies and practices team. But that team worked really hard to bring this new inclusive leadership campaign and some very specific inclusive feedback guidance for managers to the agency. And so we're going to take a phased approach so that we're working our way through. We're not just going to drop this on people, but really helping people to absorb the information and understand what these basic principles are, really help make sure that folks understand how bias creeps in and how it shows up in different conversations, whether it is something that is just a flat out, bias related act that is, something we have to address with HR, or it could be microaggressions. I mean, we hear folks talk about microaggressions, and I've even seen some websites where people are just having to question, like, is this a microaggression? And sometimes it can make you think that you're not seeing what you're seeing or you're not hearing what you're hearing. And so we want to just put it all out for our workforce so everybody understands, what these things look like, how they show up, and also how to interrupt them. Taking it a step further from just the education, but to the actual action. And so we're excited about the campaign. The guidance is out, and it's something that we're going to be excited to explore for the duration of this year and beyond, as we talk about more implications for our clients and how we deal with those relationships too.
What are the parts you're most excited about with this, Kate? And some specifics about tools you're going to try to give the managers, especially.
Well, one of the things, and you mentioned application, Marjani, and that is huge. I mean, it's not just about giving our managers these lofty, you know, goals and describing inclusive feedback in a way that you know that they can understand, but how can they take these concepts and apply them? And I think through this campaign, we've really been able to drill down into giving those real life application concepts that they can apply to the day to day with their team. The big thing about inclusive feedback is it's not separate or standalone from any good management practice. It has to go hand in hand. Inclusive feedback is embedded in effective feedback concepts. But what inclusive feedback does do is take that one step further to alert the manager to the power dynamics at play, to the potential biases that can be in play, and give them that opportunity as they're creating their feedback to check and mitigate those biases, and to check the power dynamics, so that as they're framing the feedback for employees are really able to have a clear understanding of how to take the feedback and turn it into actionable development steps. So I think that the thing that I'm most excited about with this campaign is the application piece and the level of accountability that we're going to hold our managers to create these inclusive environments for their employees and safe spaces, as well as continuing to foster the inclusive culture that we're creating here at G&S.
Yeah, and two things. One, people tend to get hung up sometimes on the idea of biases, like checking the biases. But there's another concept I'd use called files. Like we have files on things. Like I have files on, commuting, or I have files on, my history with my family, or I have files on, an experience I had. And those files become something that's like a script running in the background of your computer. You're not even aware of it. And so it can be a bias issue, or it can be just like assumptions you have about someone or a relationship you had before. And one of the really important things that I think is to connect the dots here, to see it on a bigger scale, so that checking your biases can also mean like just being aware of the files you've created. Like, oh, there's a whole file on this in my brain. I didn't even know I had a file on this. Like maybe I should look in that file. Maybe the file is out of date. And that connects with being mindful too. And the other thing that I think is really critical to what you're both saying in terms of practical application is that over my, years and years of being in management too, and I've done this myself, I often see people kind of struggling managing another person. It doesn't have to be some big situation. It could be something that just they're worried about their performance. And that person as a manager, they're just kind of caught in the fact that this person has a performance issue. And they're really like, it's a performance issue. It's a performance issue, yet they can't fully articulate what the deal is. Oftentimes there's something else mixed up in there. And we can get on our high horse about like, it's their performance. It's like, maybe it's how you guys are communicating. Maybe they're looking at you, blinking at you because they don't know how to speak to you, or you're not asking them a question, or you're making an assumption. And maybe you're walking in the room. I had a client years ago that it was a management consulting client that advised, before a difficult meeting, ask yourself who is showing up. And when you say to yourself about that person showing up, if the script you're running in your head is really negative, like they're a problem performer, they're a problem, they're this, versus maybe you flip the script and say, hey, they're a really lovely person. They're young in their career. They may not know. Like how you go into a meeting really influences the vibe you give off and the effectiveness. So I love peeling back the layers here to try to think about just being better managers, being better in community. But to switch gears a minute, Marjani, like when you hear this, your role is both DE&I VP, which is both internal but also external in terms of how we work with community and marketplace clients. But also you're a client counselor and client service professional. How do you see what we're doing around inclusion relative to the kind of counsel we give to clients? Because I see this as very permeable. Inside, outside to me is very aligned.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the benefit of working a few different places and industries in my career. I mean, majority of my background is in government here in Chicago, but then I've also worked in nonprofit and I've worked in operations, but public health. And I think healthcare is really a great example of how that sort of community comes into play. And so when we look at the way that, healthcare, professionals are working, and if they're getting what they need from their employer, if they have the mental health resources, if they have, policies that feel equitable and they're able to show up, that is a very direct impact to the patients in those settings. And so to turn it back to G&S, I mean, we look at the way that we interact with our internal workforce, but those folks are then going off and working with our clients. They're representatives of our organization as well as us. I mean, we're in rooms where it can be pretty sticky sometimes, but we're honing these skills on a daily basis and we're able to really kind of undo those files, as you mentioned, but dig deeper into empathy where we need to, dig deeper into, very nuanced counsel. I mean, we've had to jump in and counsel some of our clients on internal, communications pretty frequently, just based on how, they'd like to see their community, their culture shift, but also the way that they are being received and experiencing the communities that they're serving as well. So I think there's a ton of overlap in, the way that we are operating to kind of get our own workforce up to speed and keep our business progressing, but also the benefit directly to our clients and then the consumers that they are potentially working with.
Yeah, it's always amazing. It's certainly been for my career to kind of have that double consciousness of how are we trying to build a culture and community and a business in the best way forward. I'm very, as you guys know, like nail the basics, run the business with excellence, all that, but also the human side, and then how we carry that into our counsel for clients. So that inclusion piece, how people are seen, how they show up, the trust, how they're heard. I agree, Marjani. In healthcare specifically, in the work I've done over the years, I've seen a lot of studies that show that the satisfaction of the healthcare workforce is highly correlative to the satisfaction of patients, which has become more and more important now in terms of CMS policies and how provider organizations, an area we work in, are being judged for that, for satisfaction, for all the ways in which they interact with their communities they serve. So this has been an amazing conversation. I hate to bring it to a close, but there's we have to come to an end. So before we close, I'd love to hear one piece of advice from each of you about, again, going back to the core of this podcast, building brand gravity, that sense of attraction. What's one last piece of advice around inclusion to help organizations attract people to their brands, both internally and also externally with their stakeholders?
Yeah, internally, our goal is to continue to attract and retain top talent. And, Marjani mentioned earlier about the multi-generations that are coming into the workforce, and they are demanding to work for companies and organizations that align with their values. And we have to be ready to meet their expectations and create those spaces where they feel again safe and that sense of belonging. And so for me, creating that inclusion and that inclusive culture is mission critical if we're going to remain competitive and able to bring top talent into our organization, and more importantly, keep them in our organization. We have to continue to focus on inclusion. It's just critical to our long-term growth and success as an agency.
That's great. Marjani, what's your piece of advice?
I would say the biggest takeaway from this conversation that I would love for folks to walk away with is that inclusion is really about our humanity. We can't afford to get distracted by the jargon or, how folks are politicizing issues. At the end of the day, we're doing this for the real impact and for the humanity in us all. And so we've all got space to grow. It is not going to happen overnight. DE&I is not a new concept. There are folks who've been pushing and really driving this train for years. And so I'm excited to be a part of the effort to keep it moving. And I agree, Kate, we can't afford to take our foot off the gas because we owe it to ourselves for, a better workforce, for a better environment just moving forward and for those future generations.
That's awesome. And as host, I'm also going to give a piece of advice.
Yes.
So mine is just to encourage folks who are listening to push themselves to think more expansively about these categories and topics and to see the interconnection. So again, it's not just inclusion for inclusion's sake. It's inclusion to be stronger business, stronger managers, see those interconnections and try to avoid getting caught up in sort of what I think is a lot of reductive arguments today that are actually very counterproductive in the business world as well as in a broader societal lens. So we'll leave our listeners to chew on that. As always, we welcome feedback, comments. You can find all of our emails, find us on LinkedIn, find us wherever we are. Send us your thoughts. And I want to thank Kate Threewitts and Marjani Williams for joining me. This has been Building Brand Gravity, and we will be back with another episode soon. Thank you very much.